Okay, good evening. Welcome to the September 24th, 2018 meeting of the Board of Directors of the Sewer Authority, Midcoastside. The meeting is called to order. May we have roll call, please?
Director Reddick,
Yes, here.
Director Slater-Carter,
Present.
Director Warren,
Present.
Chair Blanchard,
Here.
Director Penrose,
Here.
Director Boyd.
Here.
Okay, thank you. So now we have item 2. Do we have anybody speaking of things on the agenda? Okay, so then we go into item 3, closed session.
That was quick.
Really?
And a pit of some sort.
Pit of acid.
Okay, welcome back. Now we're back at item
Swimming
4.
with the ducks.
And we're gonna go back and come back in open session now. And we have no reportable action out of our closed session. So now we go to item 5. And do we have any public comment on items not on, okay, so now we go to the consent agenda 6. So we have three items. Why don't we run all in?
I had a bunch of questions on the warrant report. Beverly is so shocked. So I wonder if maybe we ought to hold that from consent.
Are you proposing that we hold that from consent, or you just want?
Moving A and C?
Will it speed anything up to withhold it? Let's just improve them all at once. What are your questions?
Start at the beginning. Well, comment more than question. I'm still seeing huge numbers for Calcon. This time it's actually split into two different ones. One of them was almost 66,000, and there's another one much further down for, I forget, 12 or 13,000.
Oh, I bet everybody was trying to hide that.
Yeah, let's skip that one. The IRS thing, how, you know, these are payments that we would have always been making, but I don't remember seeing an IRS entry before, so how were these paid previously?
They were always paid EFT, it's just the way we're requesting the information be reported so that everything is clear. It was just a setting in the software. One of the things that we've sort of rooted out through the audit process is how it was being recorded.
But I mean, in 2 decades, I've never seen it, so,
This is an improvement.
Yes, it's an
Yes.
electronic fund transfer, but it should be reported because
Jesus.
it is an action.
yeah, I think that's good, and I think the problem is we didn't see it until now.
Right.
Well, maybe that's one of the difference between QuickBooks and Tyler.
Yes.
Good point.
So on the temps, what time period is covered by that 12,500?
I believe that particular one is for the month of August.
So that's 150,000 a year.
I don't plan on keeping them for a year.
But that is the
I
equivalent.
mean, I'm just wondering why there's 2, because I thought we have, the accounting tech I thought was made full-time,
Yes.
not that I even know who that is.
His name's George.
And so, basically, I'm wondering why there's so much temp time here when we have a full-time accounting tech who replaced a part-time temp, and I assume is doing at least some of what the administrative services supervisor, is that the right title, had been doing.
Well, I'm more than happy to go over their duties, but I think that might get covered during the discussion that we have on the other agenda item with regards to the audit.
Okay. And what is covered by Precision IT Consulting for a rather hefty monthly retainer?
They manage all of our software as far as the server, off the server, cloud-based. They've been assisting with several items that unfortunately I can't speak about in open session. And so that's part of it. But we also have been doing the Lucidity software. They've been involved with the implementation of that. We've been doing the OpenGov implementation. They've been involved with that. Anything that has to either work with our server system or any of our hardware, we get them involved. So we don't have staff that can do that.
Okay, looks like that's all my questions on that.
Okay, so now we go to A, approve minutes from September 10th, 2018, and then B, approve disbursements for September 24th, 2018, and receive fiscal year 2018-19 expense and revenue report for period ending August 31st, 2018. So,
I move.
okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay, so it's
So
passed.
it's moved and seconded by whom?
Well,
I went too fast.
if we're gonna give Deborah the half second on the motion, we'll call mine a second.
Okay,
Okay, okay.
for the minute. I'll take it.
Thank
You
you.
win.
Okay, so now we have item 7, regular business.
Yes.
And now we have A, discuss concerns raised by the city director regarding the audited financial statements for fiscal year ending 6/30/17, request for fiscal year 6/30/18 audit process, and give direction to staff.
Yes, and so my question is, unfortunately, because of the short notice, I wasn't able to have the auditor physically be here. He already had a time commitment somewhere else, but he is available by phone. If you would like him to be on the phone to answer any questions, or we can wait and contact him only if something comes up that you feel needs his clarification. It's up to you.
Any thoughts? I guess we just go ahead as is.
Well, I
Oh,
don't,
wait a minute.
I don't have much to say on this. I think we do need to hire somebody to handle our finances and, in the entire scope of the job description, which is broader than just a little bit of, accounting. But, beyond that, this seems to me to have, put in a lot of, ignored a lot of the work that this board has been doing over the past, long while, actually. Some of the things that have been recommended have not been, approved as part of the budget process, but we have certainly looked at them and discussed them. And, so my thought is, unless other people have questions, maybe Beverly, for the, sake of the camera and those who might read this, you could talk about what we've done in the past to have answered the past concerns that are raised in this, and apparently, there was a lack of information, on what this board has been working on, and so I think we should bring the record up to date.
Okay, well, first of all, in reference to the 2016 audit comments, there were 5 comments. 2 of them have already been implemented or partially implemented. 2016-01, which specifically had to do with segregation of duties, that was already implemented and we've been utilizing that. The reason why the auditor included it again is because of the full implementation of the software had not occurred by part of the year that they were auditing for the fiscal year end June 30, 2017. So that's why that comment was still there. But we have fully implemented all of that. The 2016, 02, 03, and 05 are beyond SAM's capability of doing on its own because it's specifically related to funding. And I have for the past 2 years been starting the budget process with the recommendation specifically to address those issues, which has not been supported by the member agency managers, and has not ended up in the budget, with the exception of this year, the $250,000 to start filling in those reserve funds. So once again, Sam can make the recommendation, but the member agencies have to approve the budget, including those recommendations. And then the 2016-04 is an issue of manpower, and that was part of what the staffing analysis showed, was that we just don't have the bandwidth to be able to do this. Certainly reviewing those policies and updating them, we can do that, but we just have to have manpower. We either have to have a consultant come in and do it, or we have to have enough bandwidth for the staff that we have, and we just have not had that. So that's the only reason why the policies and procedures one has not been completed. We've done some. The purchasing policy was updated, and we've looked at the banking policy. We have not come to a conclusion on what we wanted to do, and that was something that the finance committee had asked for me to bring back, but we small things have occurred during that time frame that have taken up our attention, not the least of which is a couple of legal actions and some spills. So that's where we were with the 2016. I take offense to the fact that it implies that nothing has been done, nor have we even tried, when the reality of it is I've spent the last 2 years in the budget process begging for those very things. As far as the CPA firm, it's not as if I needed that pointed out to me. I had already reached out to several. Once again, I had done that previously and had not had much luck, and as you recall, the one firm that everybody said, hey, if you're interested in somebody doing local bookkeeping, use that firm. About a week before I was going to bring it to the board for consideration, there was an embezzlement allegation, so I stopped looking into that firm. After the position became vacant, I contacted our previous firm to see if they would be interested. Unfortunately, the principal at that firm was moving out of state, and they were keeping their existing clients, but were not taking on any new clients.
You're talking downtown Half Moon Bay that we
Yes.
used for many, many years?
Yes.
Yeah, that's,
So then I also contacted
I
Mays and
thought we brought
Associates.
it in-house specifically because he told us he didn't want to do it anymore.
Well, I still reached out to do my due diligence to see if that was an option anymore. There were no other firms in the local area that did day-to-day bookkeeping. I mean, there's plenty of CPA firms, but there aren't any that do day-to-day bookkeeping. I contacted Mays and Associates because I know that they do provide services to the Montera district, and I wanted to see if that was something that they, one, had the bandwidth to take on, and two, what would the cost be. I did that back in August. It was my intent after I was done with the audit, because clearly the audit took precedence at that point in time to complete. My plan was to bring it back to the board and have this conversation.
So I'd like to ask a question here. So it sounds to me like you didn't first develop a scope of work for what we wanted this firm to do. You just made a few phone calls.
No, I had a
Find
scope
out
of
if-
work. I had a scope of work. I already knew what the previous firms had been doing for us. And I contacted various firms and asked them if they did that kind of work. I also contacted the firms that I know from CSMFO, from CSDA. I reached out to numerous firms, and I had a very specific list of what I was looking for.
But you didn't send out like an RFQ or an RFP or anything like that? Put it out there in the ether and see who might respond?
No, I contacted all of the firms that advertise doing that to see if I had even an interest before I went through the process of developing an RFP or an RFQ, because that does take quite some time. And most of the firms informed me that they don't do day-to-day bookkeeping. They're CPAs, they do audits, but they don't do day-to-day long-term bookkeeping. in order to start the question with the board about, is this the path you want me to go down? Because there was still some question as to that. I contacted Mays and said, could you give me an idea of what this would cost so that at least the board has some information to work with before we start going down this road? Unfortunately, I hadn't had that chance to bring this forward to the board for the discussion. But I was doing my due diligence by getting at least a ballpark figure first. Because I know that that would be one of the first questions I would be asked was, well, how much do you think this is going to cost? So that's, so you have that quote in here, which was to give me that starting point of approximately what would it cost to do these kinds of services for Sam on a regular basis. I know what we previously been paying, but that vendor is no longer an option. As far as the 2017 audit, I had just finished working with the finance committee on what my direction was as far as responding, at least in draft, to the auditor. And there was a process that I was going to go through, but unfortunately, I received this communication before I could finish that process, and it definitely seemed like something that the board itself needed to review and give direction on, rather than me responding to it individually. So you have the draft in there. This has not been vetted by the finance committee. I have not
The draft
finalized.
Mays proposal you're
No,
talking about?
I'm talking about the 2017 auditor's findings. I haven't done anything with the Mays
Page 53.
proposal.
53 in the
53, okay.
packet,
I haven't done anything with the Mays proposal because I hadn't gotten to the point where I was going to be making a recommendation one way or the other to the board. I had just asked for that information when the position became vacant. So you have that. You also have the information with regards to the Tyler implementation and the recommendation for staffing that was provided back at that time. And that there ended up being a delay of approximately 9 months before we were able to bring staff on board to actually do what we started doing July 1 of 2016. We didn't actually have, and that was just part-time staff, and we didn't have that on board until March of 2017. So that's part of the issue with the training and the delays. And then, of course, you have the staffing analysis, which had already identified that we had a staffing shortage in that area. And then following up on that, you have on page 145, you have the engagement letter from Cropper Accountancy, which addresses the concerns that were expressed in the email with regards to expanding the more traditional audit approach that we had been planning on, and what that would look like. And clearly that would be a more expensive audit than what we would normally go to, which I believe this past year's audit costed approximately $23,000. So this would be more, and he didn't have an estimate because of course we'd have to have a bigger conversation about the finance committee's request for that scope, which we hadn't done that because when we met, we weren't aware that there was a request for that. And then finally, you have the job description for the supervisor of administrative services, and which has not been changed. I just modernized the look of it, but the requirements have been the same since this was created back in 2005. And as you can see from that, there's a good deal of other work that's in here beyond just the financials. So, yes, and that's 147. So I put that in there because I wanted to make sure that you could see that there was clearly, there's a lot of work that has nothing to do with just the accounting, high-level accounting work, that is the day-to-day business of the district that we must manage somehow.
Thank you.
So are we going to comment on the responses? I have some issues with some of management responses.
on the 2016 or the 2017?
I'm talking about the 2017.
Yeah, I hadn't received any, I had sent it out,
Yeah.
and we were going to go through that process, but this sort of
Well, I think
presumes.
it's worthy of a discussion.
Well,
I don't have a problem.
And my main problem is, on page 59, it's 2017, 07, and the continuation of that on page 59. Our response that, the SAM board believes that returning unencumbered funds at the end of each fiscal year is transparent and the best method to control the authority's expenses. I'm not, and Half Moon Bay is not willing to go there to make that claim. This is something that's coming up in repeat audits. We have a net operating loss for the last 7 years. We need some more meat here about what we're gonna do. And the idea that we might discuss it at the strategic planning workshop, I don't see the relationship between this and the strategic plan workshop. That's a very high-level, goals-oriented venue. So I don't support and don't like that response and would not
If
approve
we,
that particular.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Yeah.
If we amended that to add a few things, would it work okay for you if we took that to a past tense for that initial thing? Because it has been board policy for those reasons, so that's an historical.
And it's gotten us into trouble.
Sure, but we can acknowledge that, and then there's the take a breath and then finish the rest of that thought, and that's the part that I'm asking about.
I think we're gonna have to really drill down as a board in this issue and get some consensus among the agencies about how we're gonna handle reserves going forward. So I don't think there's a pat answer here, like, we still think it's the best approach, you know.
But that wasn't the instruction that we gave either. The instruction that we gave was to understand where we've been with that, and then agree that we would take this up and hammer out how to fund the reserves.
Yeah, so I think we need something that's a little more committed.
Yeah.
That's sensitive to the
Yeah.
problems,
Well, that's
it
what
doesn't look like, denial.
Right, I think it's missing that second
Yeah.
part. Right, and I think that's what you're getting at, saying, look, where we've been with that leaves us open to criticism about the unfunded reserve. It doesn't matter that we understand that you don't fund your reserves from the leftovers, you fund your reserves from first principles, which is what we need to commit to.
We need to, take a good hard look at the past policies and potentially develop, alternatives. So
Specifically,
I want this to look like we take this very, very seriously.
Yeah.
And I don't like the responses to some of them about, well, we'll look at this as part of our strategic planning process. I don't get that at all.
Scott.
I don't get the relationship between that process and this process.
I was merely plugging in with the direction that I received during the finance committee.
well, there was no agreement there.
Yeah.
So we asked
There
for
was no
draft language, right?
disagreement.
Yes,
I-
there
I
was. I think
Hang on, is that done?
I would suggest that instead of approaching it as strategic plan, because this is, sorry, go on.
as I said then and before, I'll keep saying it, the appropriate way to fund reserves is with an explicit line item in the budget. And disguising how the reserves are funded by using the overages, among other problems, doesn't encourage accurate budgeting.
This isn't the agenda item though. So I don't think it's
But the-
appropriate for us
I-
tonight to get into that discussion.
Leonard,
Unless
I
it's
think you
appropriately
are
agendized.
correct, and what I was
The
going
concern
to
is he's
say,
telling us how to fix a problem he identified, and he doesn't get to do that. He gets to identify the problem, but not tell us how to fix it.
that's fine,
Yeah.
but I would suggest that in order for this board to be able to develop a way to fix it, it can either be through the finance committee having workshops, or the entire board working on this on a Saturday. I agree with Debbie, I think the strategic plan doesn't offer enough time to really, and intensity just for this one critical, part of Sam's funding and structure.
I think we need a workshop just on this item.
I would agree
Yeah.
entirely with that, maybe, and we should perhaps squeeze it in prior to the budget, so that
Yeah.
Leonard's concerns about putting it in as part of the transparency of our own budget process should happen. And I think frankly, it should be videotaped. We should have Pacifica TV here so folks can understand the finance.
Can we do it during the week though, not on a weekend?
Can I offer a devil's advocate point of view on this? We've all talked about funding the reserves. How about we give direction to staff that the budget proposal does that? And I don't wanna spend a Saturday to sit around and agree that we need to fund the reserves, because we said that at our last meeting, we talked about it during the finance committee, no one here tonight is disagreeing with that. It's just a question of, are we gonna do it, and to what degree, and on what schedule? And that seems like a fiscal question, but I'd rather look at proposals and ask ourselves, what can we manage, what's fiscally prudent? I'd rather spend the time on that, but I don't see how that takes a weekend.
It
I-
shouldn't.
I also think that the general managers of the agencies ought to have this discussion, maybe they need to have this discussion first,
I like that idea.
and come up with some ideas, some options.
Well, there's either we fund it or we fund it as agencies in our own reserves, and I feel that this letter that we're talking about shows that there are a lot of holes in the knowledge base of at least one general manager, and probably because it references others in all of them.
No, I can see, I mean, we haven't gotten anywhere trying to explain to people the express policy of this board that was taken and carried out over a number of years about you return the slush fund, and that if there's a shortage, the agencies know and agree that we're responsible to come up with the money when the time comes. That the reserves are held, they're just not all held here. But we do have a reserve policy, and unless we're gonna modify that policy, and I don't hear anyone arguing that we should, then we should be in wild agreement that we just pick the amount that we're going to spend to start putting the money back in the fund.
There's one modification to the reserves policy that I think the board should make as soon as possible. And I don't know what as soon as possible ends up meaning, but the operational reserve, apparently when we originally adopted the policy, we put a dollar figure on it, and that was a mistake. That we need to fix now, and it needs to be re-specified as like 2 months or 3 months of expenditures. So
It is 2 months. But-
it's not a dollar figure
No,
anymore?
it's 2 months, but the problem is that 2 months at that time when that was adopted is what they put away, and they never increased it because operating costs increased. So it was, when it was explained to me as, this is the amount that was approved at that time, but that's not what the policy says. The policy says 2 months of operating, and there was some question about what did that mean, 2 months of operating. So, because there is an ongoing discussion, debate, but however, about what is O&M. And then also, it was understood at that time, at least by staff that was here and was dealing with it, that excluded the contract services, and yet I still have to pay those before, I front those costs before I get paid. So if I don't have cash flow to pay for those, how am I supposed to do that?
Boy, I don't remember anything being excluded.
Well, it said this was a JPA reserve. This is not contract services, this is the JPA.
See, it sounds like this hasn't been looked at with a clear definition of what's happening in a long, long time. And much like the IPS, much like the electrical system, not looking at these things doesn't make the problems go away, it only makes them worse when they happen.
Well, I think one of the things we can do as part of a response to the management letter is I think we do need to hire a CPA / bookkeeping firm but I think they need to do more than, I think they need to do some of the day-to-day stuff, but I think we need to have them we need a new scope of work, or an amended scope of work, and we need to see it, that has them looking at, reviewing our current policies or lack thereof, and helping us develop a policy manual, something in writing about how we handle our accounting and our bookkeeping, our accounts
We have one.
payables, all that stuff. Well, I'd like them to review it. We need to clean our house here, our financial house here. And it's not enough for me right now, given the series of management letters. It's not enough for me to just kind of look at things on a piecemeal basis. I want somebody independent from the outside, in addition to handling the day-to-day, reviewing our overall policies and procedures and making recommendations on those. How are we going to, I don't wanna hire a staffer right now. I don't want to hire somebody to come in here with things up in the air, with all this, the multiple audits going on and the software being introduced and people getting trained. I want somebody to come in, look at what we're doing and tell us what we need to be doing. You know, look at our strengths, look at our weaknesses.
Are you suggesting just an interim setup, for outside
Well,
contract?
potentially Mays can do it, but I want them to, take a higher level view of what we're doing,
Right,
not just
Are
handling
you
it.
thinking indefinitely or for some relatively predictable amount of time?
Well, I think the day-to-day stuff like you had in your scope of work, I think we need to do for a while before bringing somebody on into this, what I call a mess, right? So, we want them as part of the day-to-day. We want some people doing day-to-day stuff, bookkeeping. We want somebody in the firm looking in general at how we're doing things, our policies and procedures, our practices, our daily routine practices. Identify problems and make recommendations about how to clean up what we're doing. Whether it's staffing, whether it's, practices, whether it's segregation of duties, I don't know. They need to look at our internal control procedures and make recommendations. And I wanna do that as part of this scope of work with the CPA. And I'm not willing to support filling Kathy's position for the time being until we straighten all this out. Get our audits done, get some recommendations from Mays or some other accounting firm. But we need some, laser level eyes on what we're doing internally.
Well, it seems to me that the hiring for everybody other than contracts and our general manager is up to the general manager. And I think we need to not run off and bring in more people who are unfamiliar with Sam. And I think we've got a staff we've already got temps. It was quite clear from the problems that we had in the past that too many temps is much like too many cooks and cooking. It creates more problems. Sam has worked quite well for a number of years. There were a few things that improvements that didn't work out as well as that were well intended but badly necessarily implemented, but we're over that now.
But we had, as long as we had contract auditors, things, were generally okay.
And we
When
still
we brought
do.
things in-house,
You
it
mean
became
account-
problematic.
No, are you
You
talking
said
about
audit,
auditors
you
or
mean
accountants?
Talking about, I'm sorry, accountants, bookkeepers, parsons.
That was not the case. That was not the case. And I mean, I can call John right now and he can explain to you that was not the case.
That might be useful.
We had several issues and some of it was noted in the 2016 audit and it was again noted in the 2017 audit that the issue was having multiple people touching it and having inconsistency in how they were doing it. And the fact is there was no one overseeing it with qualifications to identify that what was being done was appropriate. So you had contracted out your accounting, your day-to-day bookkeeping but it is still Sam's responsibility to have oversight, and there was no one in-house providing that oversight.
And
And that was a concern,
And you went with Tyler over QuickBooks because?
because you can, not only can you segregate duties, but you can actually, through the software, prevent people from doing transactions that they're not authorized to do. Which was one of the first things that I identified when I got here and I looked at the QuickBooks system and how many people had been utilizing it. But I also wanna explain part of, I had mentioned when Director Warren had asked what we were buying with that temp service. And I promised I would explain that as part of this discussion. Part of that is exactly what you've asked for. I have a retired CFO who is many years of not just accounting, but specifically municipal accounting work through a firm called Muni Services, and that's what they do. So they are a consulting firm, they're not just a temp agency, they are very specifically a consulting firm. And what they are doing right now, both of those temps, are not only going through and helping us clean up and prepare for this year's audit, they are also setting up all of the checklists, all of the monthly closing, and the schedules for the audit going for now and going forward. So they're doing all of those reviews that you're talking about. That's what we're paying for. Otherwise, I could have just gotten a temp from an agency. I specifically got them from Muni Services to provide exactly what you've asked for.
So they're creating procedures for the
Yes.
future.
Yes.
Right.
And there were procedures in place. The problem was we had difficulty with the lack of staffing and not having somebody on board at the time that we went live with the software. 9 months later, having somebody come on board and get trained, we were already 9 months behind. And so trying to train at the same time that we were also trying to do the cleanup was part of the problem. That's what these temps are doing.
So explain to me then why there is a scope of work and a proposal from Mays in this agenda packet that you were looking at just a month ago.
Because, and once again, my intent was to bring this forward in a very planned manner, with a very thoughtful approach. Unfortunately, I wasn't given that as an option. The grenade was thrown before I had the option to present it. The discussion was going to be around what are the possibilities of hiring someone for this position with the qualifications and the very high likelihood that we may not be able to get someone that has that entire skill set. And I was going to mention that also I sat on the panel as the Harbor District went through this exact same process to fill their exact same position, and it took them 3 tries and the difficulties that they had. And what I wanted was an alternative for the board to consider, that if I could not hire someone with this strong skill set in the accounting, that the other alternative was to find someone who had the other skill sets and supplement it with this.
Yeah, so I'm not in favor of filling that position right now for the reasons I stated. I am supportive of hiring a CPA firm to do, handle the day-to-day stuff, but I also want them to review our policies and procedures in response to the 2 recent audit management letters, to see where we are. And, you know, as we move through this process and get better audits, I'll feel more comfortable about bringing somebody in rather than throwing them to the lions. So I'm not ready to agree to have that position filled right now. I think we're better suited by having a new set of independent eyes come in and help us square things in terms of policies and
but-
procedures.
We already have it, and frankly, I'm getting a little concerned about not only costs, among other things. You know, we have talked about this, and I think consistency is very important. I think we've got our auditor's comments. I think it's better to establish, have respect for those and to work with them and not to bring in more new people who are going to have to feel like they have to justify their hiring and come up with all other kinds of changes, and pretty soon we're going to have a real hodgepodge while we try and get through this. Certainly the reserve policy, as long as people are willing to fund, as long as agencies are willing to fund what Sam needs, it's not a big deal. It's when they stop paying their bills that we get into problems. And it's when they decide to stop funding things that they have funded in the past and fund them under protest. All those kinds of things lead to a real nightmare financially for all agencies involved. And so I think we need to hire somebody who's qualified, who can create something that works. I'm glad we have made progress, and I'd love to hear from John Cropper about the past, because I think, again, making decisions needs full information, and he certainly has it. He's looked very closely at this, and maybe we should take a break while we set up the conference call.
Before we do that though, there's a procedural problem though, Debbie, and that is, and I'm not sure if this comes from our JPA agreement or if this comes from the Sanitary District Act, but the board, I'm pretty sure through one of those two mechanisms, only has the authority to hire and fire the general manager and general counsel.
That's my thought.
I believe that's correct, but
Is that from the Sanitary District Act or the JPA agreement?
It's the JPA
Would
agreement,
be
tell
in
us
the-
about it.
yeah, I think it's in the JPA agreement, because I don't think the Sanitary District Act gets that specific.
Well, that may be so, but I think it's a bad idea. Certainly, the Mays proposal is a lot more affordable, you know.
Let me clarify.
Yeah.
The staffing analysis that was done, both by me and by the external agency, indicated insufficient staffing to do all of the things that need to be done. Not having that position is not just about the accounting. I'm doing both now with the assistance of the two temporary employees, and I'm drowning.
If I might, to that point, I've been quiet on this so far. The job description covers three areas: the financial, the administrative, and personnel. And for the financial, as written, it's largely an oversight and reporting position. It doesn't actually contemplate like running the books and doing the accounting system. So I think it would be consistent with going out to an outside firm like we had before. I mean, this is largely what we had in 2005, right?
Yes.
So
It is exactly.
it was written with that in mind, and as I read through it, I marked it all up, and I think it's consistent with going out, but still having someone who's the liaison and responsible for turning some of that stuff into the stuff that we see, some of our regulators see. That can be done by an accounting firm, but it would take some knowledge of who we have to do all that with. I don't know, I think that might be open to figuring out how to put the pieces on the board for that. But the other two, the admin and the personnel, Mays or any other accounting firm isn't gonna be well situated to do that stuff. And I believe that position needs to be filled. I don't think it needs to be the heavy accounting reliance that we had. Reading it puts a lot of requirements about someone's financial training and understanding on this role, but I don't see this role having to be the one that executes on the actual bookkeeping and even establishing or tuning up the procedures for controls and accountability. So I would like to see a position staffed that takes care of that kind of oversight and reporting role, the admin and the personnel. We have to have personnel. we have to have someone run the administrative. And I don't think we are staffed at a level where we can just say, well, just have everybody else pick that up. Personnel's too particular an issue to leave as a catch-all.
Excuse me.
I think we bring a contractor in from the outside, let them participate in helping cleaning it all up, and then bring in some staff to implement.
One thing I don't think anybody ever contracts out though is HR.
Do I have well, you had mentioned John, is it worth calling?
I'm,
Do you wanna call John?
given where we are on the time, I'm not really interested in spinning up something extra here.
Makes sense, sorry.
And I'm not familiar with any case where HR's been outsourced.
Not here.
And by the way, you referenced the Harbor District, I wouldn't use them as a shining example of anything.
No, I'm just saying, I watched them go through the process to fill an almost identical position, and it took them 3 tries.
Right, but that's the Harbor District.
That, it had nothing to do with the Harbor District. I can't talk about it because that was an internal personnel issue for them as well. But I can tell you, after watching it, and having watched some of the other agencies on the peninsula struggle with this, it is an issue. And just so you know, it's a non-issue about hiring, because I got 0 applications. So
And-
part of what I was going to be saying was, before I received this, was that since I had not, it was time to talk about, should we rework this job description so that maybe it doesn't have quite that financial requirement and is looking more at the administrative personnel and other aspects of it. Because I cannot continue to do all of that.
Yeah, and I think it's very important that we preserve the privacy component of the personnel department. I mean, there's issues surrounding personnel and HR that need attention and that can be problematic if they don't get the attention they deserve, so I understand that.
Leonard, I will say that given the reputation that Sam has in the industry and in the agency with the rolling revolving door of general managers, the lawsuit, the internal fighting that's going on, the backbiting between the managers, if nobody would want to work for this.
Yeah,
We will be lucky to be able to get somebody, and I think even finding an agency that's willing to put up with it. Given that, all of the issues that I just mentioned, I think it could be difficult. I would like to see us hire somebody who could, put this agency, make the tweaks that need to be changed, but overall, this has been working, this agency has had clean audits, it continues to have audits, with suggestions that are very doable.
so, aside from the fact that I'm still stuck on the procedural thing, wouldn't it make sense though to suggest to Beverly that, she hired the outside CPA firm as an interim so that she can catch her breath?
Yeah.
And then she can put more effort into the recruiting.
And who's going to oversee that to make sure mistakes aren't made like before?
Well, I don't know enough about how the accounting works, so I can't answer that.
Well, I understand that Montera uses Maze, Half Moon Bay uses Maze, reputable firm,
For audit.
for audit.
Yeah.
Um,
We've been very pleased with Maze on the operational front, very professional.
yeah,
My sense is that, if you look at the Harbor District and you say it's a mess, you can look at Sam and say it's a mess.
That's right.
And there are all sorts of reasons for it, all sorts of justifications. Nobody's pointing fingers anywhere.
That's not
In
really
this.
true.
Well,
In the email.
let's let her get through.
I'm talking for myself.
I'm sorry.
I am pointing fingers nowhere. I have no interest in pointing fingers. I do want, in the venue of public opinion, for Sam to be able to say, we have cleaned up whatever act it is that you have found we're responsible for. We're coming at this with a new face. We're a new Sam, and we're gonna do things and make everybody happy, and we're gonna do it right.
Yes.
And I think that by getting an outside firm to come in and just say, okay, you have to do this, that, the other, tweak it, and you say, well, we've been working on it and we agree with you, or, you know, as you've said, so many of these things have been
Yeah.
in process already. It shouldn't take a terribly long amount of time, it shouldn't take a whole lot of money, and we gain the respect of the public back. So I'm, you know, and in terms of hiring, I'm not sure about hiring someone for administrative reasons, that might be, but I don't want to be hiring somebody to handle financial matters until we have that oversight done, have it cleared up, and then we can go forward and say, well, this is what we need to do. And I think that in terms of, you know, our reserve policy, that's another, you know, big thing that could be handled so much more easily once we have an umbrella of peace here.
A stamp of respectability.
Yeah.
And we can answer, you know, the auditor in the upcoming next year's audit,
Well,
that we've taken certain steps, and he can be satisfied. He said at the meeting on the 27th, August 27th, I watched it on TV, I wasn't in attendance. He said, if we don't change what we do in a meaningful way, that they will not be our auditors again. They will refuse to work with us. So I took notes watching this on TV. I could go through the litany of dire warnings and extreme talk I heard from everybody, not just the auditor. I came away thinking, you know, this is not good. We need to take urgent, specific actions to address it, not double down on old policies and old ways of doing things, but to actually accept the recommendations we're hearing from reputable outside consultants and making their recommendations actionable. Doing these things transparently so the public can see it, as Deborah Penrose just said, and moving forward. You know, just us saying, it's okay, we're taking care of it, just isn't enough, I don't think. Not in the court of public opinion.
Okay, so we have John,
agree very much.
thank you for that. John, would you like to speak?
All I wanted to say
Sorry.
is that I was as surprised as anybody to see this item on the agenda.
Okay,
I had sent, at the request of the city manager, an email which simply laid out some thoughts about the concerns and issues related to the audit and about perhaps how we move forward in terms of correcting some of these issues. Was I surprised with this on the agenda? Yes, I was. I thought that we might have a conversation prior to this coming to a board discussion and debate. So the issue of where did we start, why did we deal with this? I don't know why we're even here having the conversation about the city's email. The city's email was copied to the other general managers in hopes that we would have a conversation internal before exposing this and putting this out to the public process and allowing that to happen. And that's what I would like to say just from that point. It looks like we're maybe heading toward a motion. I'm hopeful for everybody for that. But I did not intend for this to be a debate item for this coming agenda, just in hopes that it would kick in some conversation. And obviously, your general manager was thinking about using outside consultant services. It looks like we're actually thinking much the same way about the needs and issues and concerns about how we operate and how you deal with things, because we're all facing challenges of our own staffing. So again, I think there's more similarities and consistency among where we are than there are differences, but we always seem to emphasize the differences. So let's start to emphasize where we agree on things.
Well, I would like to make a comment to that, if I may.
sure.
Thank you. I found that a lot of this has been discussed in previous agendas. Half Moon Bay has, and the other agencies, we've all talked about costs and timeliness of so on, things that needed to get done first. And I find that having the agencies get involved in the internal hiring practices, which should be something, this was what your recommendation was, and I'm not going to address you. Having the general managers get involved in the hiring and staffing at SAM.
Where is that?
Put an immediate hold on the hiring process.
And where does it say that the member agencies would be involved in the hiring?
It was forwarded, no, it doesn't say that. Getting involved means things like saying, put an immediate hold on the firing process.
Well, I
that-
would interpret that as saying that the member agencies are being asked to be involved in the hiring.
No, it's a recommendation from a member agency. Is that what you're trying to say?
Thank you very much, Leonard, I'm glad you understood. I was sure someone would. And
Thanks, I think.
we also believe that proceeding with hiring of a staff person at this time will not be fair to that individual, will not result in the best possible candidate pool or serve in the best interests of SAM and its member agencies. I just believe that and sending this to all of the agencies, I think that was a nice thing to do. But getting involved in the internal work, too involved in the internal workings of SAM, I believe, is frankly out of scope for the member agencies. I think it should be handled through the budget process. And I think this was out of line. And as a board member, where I can recall, I haven't kept the lists and so on, and I'm not going to bother going through, but many of these things have been discussed on previous agendas. And the general manager at SAM works at the direction of this board, not the general managers of all the agencies. There's supposed to be communication, but not, the general manager here is not under the supervisorial authority of the three member agencies. And to say that, to put words in here like clean up the books, that implies nefarious and bad things. I think that there are.
Read the management letter.
I believe we are working on it, and I would like for us to be talking about how we proceed going forward, but I see that that's not going to happen. I believe the reason the audit process was a full year late was because of other issues. And again, not only were the prior issues not resolved, they have been under resolution. And so I feel as a board member offended by this. It had the sense of tell your board what we're going to do here, and I don't particularly like that.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion
Yes.
to focus discussion, if I may. I'd like to move that we direct the general manager to prepare a scope of work for review confirmation by the finance committee, or not, for contract CPA financial services that includes at a minimum day-to-day management of SAM accounting and related financial services, review existing and where necessary, prepare revised policies and procedures in response to the fiscal year 15-16 and 16-17 audited financial statements and management letters, assist in the full implementation of the Tyler Accounting Enterprise software, and other duties as needed.
May I suggest, Mr. Chair, that we
Yes.
first have entertain a
And we-
motion to extend the meeting?
So how much time do you need to make?
Well,
Right.
before I
Yes.
can even consider voting on that, I need to see the whole thing printed, because that was just too much to
Yeah.
absorb
Could we-
verbally.
Could we first extend, sorry.
I'd like to move that we extend the meeting for 10 minutes,
I think we're gonna need more time on that.
15 minutes.
Second.
Okay, how much, initially at 15?
Yeah.
What is it?
15.
15, okay. Okay,
Thank you.
Well,
I
hopefully they can
apologize.
take notes
Sorry,
and
we need
read
to
back,
vote on this.
right?
yeah, we have to vote on finance. All
That
in
was a,
fa- okay,
that was a
so
lot
all-
to take in.
Make a roll call vote, please.
All in favor, take a roll call.
Can I offer some points of clarification
No.
that
Wait, we
might
have
be-
to extend the meeting. We are
Oh, I'm
fine.
sorry, I thought you already had.
Oh,
I thought we already had
No, we
extended
haven't,
the meeting.
not a roll call vote.
Oh,
We
sorry.
didn't vote, yeah.
No, we don't
Oh,
need
sorry.
a roll call,
We don't need a roll call vote.
Well,
but we do need to vote.
Catherine
Yeah.
saying, all in favor, say aye.
Aye?
Aye.
Yeah, any opposed?
Opposed?
No,
Okay, so one person opposed,
Two.
two.
2 opposed. Okay. So we have 6.
I would like to have full information and have had the opportunity to talk to the auditor before this. I move that we put this on our next agenda.
There is a motion already on the floor, I think.
Was there a second on it?
I haven't had a chance to second it because we stopped that
Sorry.
and did the time, but I would be happy to second that motion.
I think that it was long enough and complicated enough that we need to see a printed copy of it.
Yes. I agree with that.
Can you email Leonard a
Yeah,
printed
but the
copy
next
of it?
meeting's at the end of October.
Can you email him a copy of your
No,
motion?
it should be emailed to all of us.
Well, yeah. Can you do that?
I can.
If it was emailed to, say, the general manager, she could print it here, and, I mean, it could be emailed to everyone, but
No, for the public record, it needs to be available for the minutes, so it does need to be emailed to the general manager and printed.
Can we do that, and how long would that take?
You want me to do it right now?
Yes.
that was a bit long to be able to take down with a pen and paper,
Yes.
I'm afraid.
Yeah, somehow I think that there's no way the recording secretary could possibly have gotten that.
Okay, I'm sending it to,
My mother did lightning fast shorthand and she couldn't have gotten it.
okay, problem here.
Can we
Why
do the
not?
rest of the agenda
Yeah,
while
go ahead.
we're
So
waiting for that?
we have, okay, we have 7B. So, we're work doing 7B while we're waiting.
I'm not interested in even hearing 7B tonight when this board is
I'm in the same
stuck
way.
on this kind of issue.
I think we can put that off.
Anybody who thinks this board deserves a pay raise right now is out of their mind. In my not carefully considered opinion. It's getting late.
You realize that all members are getting texted
Motion's
about
gone.
anyway, so
I'm sorry?
why do I care?
It's sent.
Oh, yeah, I was waiting, I had to go get my, so I could see the email when it came in. Well, while we're waiting for that, can I make some points of clarification, since I'm probably the only person who has the entire picture of what's going on inside Sam with regards to this? So I've had detailed conversations with the auditor and, you know, I could call him, he could tell you and confirm what I'm about to say. The majority of the issues of his concerns have to do with, one, were staff implementing and training properly. That was a staff time issue. We did not have sufficient staff in order to be able to do so, so we were not able to implement fully. It has been fully implemented. So that's already occurred. The training is an ongoing thing. It's not like you get training and you're done. As things come up, as staff use the software, there's an ongoing training component. That's already started. That started back in January. So that has already been happening. And once again, I can't train somebody that's not here. So if I have a vacancy, I cannot train that person, which was the problem we had when we first implemented, is it took 9 months to hire that person, so I couldn't train someone that was not here. So, that being said, I don't want to put this on Tyler. Tyler was implemented properly. We had some fine tuning moments, but nothing that was catastrophic. It was the lack of time to be able to train as we were implementing, because we didn't have the staff who were going to be able to use it. So I wanna check that box. The Encode system has already been fully implemented and is being used with no issues right now. There are no issues with using Tyler right now. The training of staff is sort of beyond just the software. Part of it was we had staff that weren't as familiar with governmental accounting. There's a very big difference between governmental accounting and private sector accounting. So part of that training included that. And we've done that and we've satisfied that. And I've already had the conversation with the auditor. He does not have any concerns about that. He had concerns about using an outside accounting firm previously, but he said, given the proper oversight, he does not have a problem with that. But once again, that would be part of that policy would be the oversight, who's responsible, how it's done, some of those procedural things that were clearly missing in the previous practice that gave him concern. So no problem with that. About 80% of the issues that we encountered both in the 2016 and the 2017 audit had to do with the funding or lack thereof of SAM, not the day-to-day operations. Clearly, with the software, that brought some of those other issues up, but it's still, the majority of his issues and his concerns were with funding SAM and reserves so that SAM he felt comfortable behind a statement that SAM was in a adequate financial position. And that had much to do with the budget process and funding SAM reserves. The reserve policy, was it sufficient? Did we need to look at that again? So I am not opposed to having a CPA firm come in and do that, but I think much of it is already being done, and the conversation with Cropper Accountancy is they're satisfied with what we're doing. We just haven't had that next level conversation with him with regards to these are all the things we've implemented. I verbally have had those conversations, but they haven't come in for this year's audit. That's supposed to happen next month. There's no way that I can get all of this in place and all of those things done that you're asking for in time for their field work for the 2018 audit. So I started, like I said, I started part of this back in January, the rest of it I started in May. To do so now, I feel like it would be after sort of when it needed to happen. When it needs to happen is before the auditors come in for their 2018 audit, and we're well on our way, which is the reason why I've taken the approach with regards to the using very specific temporary agency, the Muni services. The other issue is that with all of the other administrative functions that are going on right now, not the least of which is, a couple of lawsuits and some public records requests that are taking up a huge amount of time. Without filling this either on a temporary basis, which I would never allow a temporary to access personnel records. So unless I could at least hire someone who could access that, that's where my time is gonna be. And my time, I believe, is best served on the other issues that should be taking up my time, some of the legal issues and some of the other items that we've discussed. But there isn't anyone else that I feel comfortable handling those very specific issues. I also have to start dealing with the MOU issue, that it expires June 30 at the same time as does the contract with Half Moon Bay. We can't wait until the last minute to have those discussions, and we'd already started the process. So all of these things are going on at the same time. I think it's necessary to get someone in who at the very least can do those other, we can have a conversation about how much of that high level accounting you want them to do, but they still need to have a certain level of oversight, because there has to be somebody other than the general manager who's doing that. Because I can't be everywhere at all times.
I understand. I just want to reiterate I share your concern about all these things are going on, that was your
Mhm.
quote just now, all these things going on, we have multiple audits,
Mhm.
multiple management letters,
Mhm.
and everything else that's on your plate. And we think that having the outside CPA firm coming in and taking a 30,000-foot view of what's going on here internally, our control structure, would help to pull things together, create a consensus view in the public about what's happening and what needs to be done. So this is the reason that we brought this issue up. It didn't need to happen tonight, by the way, as Mr. Dowdy mentioned, but it was put on the agenda, so that's why we're having this
Well,
discussion.
and so I wanna, reiterate the reason why, is because, as I'm sure many of you are aware, emails to and from me end up in the public view, no matter what happens. And so, if it's after the fact, it always looks as if Sam is reactionary, and I did not want this to look like Sam was, reacting to another article or another PRA. Had I been allowed to just proceed, this information would have come to the board in a natural flow anyway, especially since I hadn't gotten any applications. That would have been the very next thing I would have been talking to this board about, is how do we want to proceed? But it had a very policy-oriented direction to it, which of course, I'm not the policymaker, this board is, and that's why it came here. It very clearly said, we should not make policy decisions. I don't see hiring an existing position with a well-established job description and funded in the budget as a policy decision. But that's how it was broached, so I wanted to bring that forward. I didn't feel that it was my place to interpret it, because that felt very much like something the board should weigh in on, which is why I brought it forward. So that's where I am with that.
Yeah. So do we have, so how do we, what are the next steps then? How do we proceed here?
Our extension is running out, so I was just asking if there was a motion to further extend the meeting, or what we wanna do.
Is
so
there
that
gonna
we-
be more discussion on this motion?
I have yet to see it.
Yeah.
Okay, it came, sorry, it did come, it finally came through. I don't know
So-
why it delayed.
I haven't seen
So,
it. Yeah.
I hear us all talking about, look, let's prepare to go get an accounting firm involved, right? I think we can offer that direction now. I think you have a lot of wording around that, and I think you've shared that with her. We've kind of talked around the issue of what are we gonna do about personnel and admin. I think we need that person, and I don't think it needs to be a temp. And I don't know how we serve this agency's stability by putting that off. We also need someone to liaise with the accounting firm. Now, that could be Beverly, or it could be someone with specific accounting skill. I think the supervisor position is the one that for many years was the liaison.
A new person coming in is not gonna be able to wrap their minds around
Well, no,
this
but
and do
somebody's
that.
got to do the liaison, and right now,
No.
barring that, it's Beverly who's also doing all the other things to cover for the hole in the admin and personnel. Putting together a lot of the stuff for our meetings and, all those things. So, what are we gonna do? I agree, there's some ramp time, but I don't, frankly, if we were to put someone like Mays in the position of saying, okay, come check it out, tell us where we might need to adjust our procedures.
Even do just that piece and not all the other
Well,
stuff, the
right.
day-to-day or whatever.
Right, but I mean, what a great time to train someone. So the fact that they are new, I don't know that that's a detriment. I mean, they've got to whoever's new has to train up on all the staff and admin stuff, right? I don't think it works against our interest here, of going ahead and staffing this position. I think it would work against our interest if we were saying, look, we wanna go with someone, an outside accounting firm, but in the long run, we're just gonna pick someone to come and do all of that. I don't know, that's not what we're saying. I'm
Then
prepared
hire the
to,
accounting firm to just do the overall policy review, policies and procedures review.
I have
At
a
a minimum.
motion to extend the meeting for another 5 minutes.
So when you're saying
Will
the
someone
procedures,
second that?
second,
Second.
All in
The
favor?
second point in
All
the
in favor, say aye.
motion.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Anyone opposed?
I am opposed.
2, 3, 1.
I
One.
think,
I count 7-1.
So are you talking about the financial procedures, or are you talking about, I mean, are you?
Yeah, you know,
Oh, I'm fine with someone like Mays coming in to say, you know, if there's room for cleaning things up, correcting
Yeah.
things, adjusting things to more modern practices or whatever, I think it's well within the capability of a firm like that. I wouldn't, I don't know how a firm like that provides the other financial liaison reporting function responsibilities that a staffer would. You know, just reading through the description and the way that we used to have it, I mean, we did bookkeeping entry, but there was like preparing the staff reports and putting together reports for regulators, that kind of stuff. Accounting firm, what we want is a good clean set of books, one that we can feel good about, right?
All right, and I have no objection to hiring somebody. I don't think that if we do hire somebody, they're gonna be effective as a liaison with the CPA firm that's coming in to clean up our procedures and
Well, not right off
policies,
the bat,
et cetera,
Yeah,
right away. On the other hand, they may be able to get trained in doing the work that they're gonna eventually be doing. It doesn't help Beverly out any in terms of taking the load off of her being a liaison, but
it's not gonna help to delay it either, right?
it's, no, I
Yeah.
don't think so.
Well, and to say, first of all, I wanted to apologize, I didn't mean to interrupt you earlier,
Sure,
and
no, fine.
I'm very passionate about this topic, as you can probably tell.
Yes.
But also, my recommendation all along was to hire an outside firm to help with the policies, so we're back to what I had
Yes.
asked for in the first place.
Yes,
So I have no problem having somebody come in and help with those policies, because that is a huge workload.
right.
So I am
we need them,
fully in
we
support.
need them to do that.
Never would you hear me argue against it.
So-
We definitely need that.
So we're really running late. I think,
I think we're reaching consensus here.
yeah, and I think we're reaching consensus largely around what you were proposing. I think, why don't we just give that direction to?
Well, we have a motion on the floor.
Yes, did
Yeah,
you want
we
me to
haven't read
read
it,
it?
and that's,
We have
that's
to
long
print
and
it.
We can,
complicated. I think, but,
Let
let's
her
make
read
a
it
simple
one more
motion.
time.
Scott, why don't you try and make a
We
simple
have,
motion?
we already have a motion on the floor.
well, but what I'm,
Why don't you
well, I'm
let
willing
Scott,
to amend the motion.
I'm
to
going for a
address-
simpler thing to get us out of here.
Right.
She's gotta bring us back something, right? I think where, I mean, she's gone out to start looking for the person to fill this job description as written. The job description is consistent with what we're talking about with partnering up with an accounting firm, because it was always written with that in mind.
Let me just reread the relevant
Okay,
bullet point here, and that was to review existing and where necessary, prepare revised policies and procedures in response to the fiscal year 15-16, 16-17 audited financial statements
Yeah.
and management letters.
yeah.
okay, so Mays could do that,
Yes.
Okay, so,
but we still need internal,
no, okay, but,
Right, this is a two-piece thing. It's
right,
the
so we're saying,
staffing piece, it's
we're
the
saying,
auditor.
let's get the
or
staffing
accounting
done.
piece.
at the same time
Yeah.
that we get an accounting firm that has that we give the purview to come in, take a good hard look, adjust our policies, or at least make strong recommendations for adjusting policies where we need to, and train up the internal liaison to work with those policies and to be effective in working with them.
And communicate with the auditor.
yes.
Well, that's it, that's in the job description. So,
Yeah.
so if we're good with that, I think we can just give that direction.
Okay.
I think hiring temps to do this kind of stuff, first of all, there's a personnel issue, but temps always need training. They
Well, no.
always have a time, so I think keeping it simple, hiring Mays and hiring somebody internal to meet that job description is what we need to
Yeah,
do.
well, no one's advocating for more succession
No.
of temps.
we have a second? That's what
I believe
that's
this,
motion.
is this a modification of your
Yes.
motion
Yes,
that
it
you're
is.
acceptable?
That's
Is that
what I
acceptable to
And
the
I will,
second?
I will then second the modified,
Okay.
modified.
So I have Reddick
Okay,
and Penrose
there you
with
go.
the
Yeah,
amended
yeah.
recommendation.
All right, so
Okay,
I'm all for it.
okay. Yeah, so you ready to vote then? Or you want to just-
How much is included in this motion now?
Just the direction on the
Policies and procedures,
Right.
that's all we're doing right now.
Right.
May's policies and procedures, and Beverly will continue to search and hire somebody to do the internal supervisorial and liaison work.
Right.
Yes, I
Okay,
understood
all
what
in
that
favor,
meant.
ready to
Okay.
vote?
Yeah.
Okay, so all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay, very, very good.
Unanimous.
Thank you.
Let's hear that gavel swing.
There you go, okay.
Aye.
Thank you, everybody.
Oh, my God.
And here we go, so the meeting, ready to adjourn the meeting? Okay. The meeting's adjourned, thank you very much.
22?